What's good? It's Woog. This fight is not for the faint of heart. We have Leigh Wood, 26 wins and 2 losses, defending his WBA Featherweight belt against Mauricio Lara, 25 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw. This is the second attempt at making this fight. They tried to make it late in 2022, but Leigh Wood had to pull out due to a bicep injury that he sustained from sparring. And one thing I noticed about the guy's records is that if that rematch between Mauricio Lara and Josh Warrington, after Mauricio Lara pulled off one of the biggest upsets and one of the most vicious knockouts of 2021, if that draw due to headbutts and Lara's cut sustained by a frequent Josh Warrington headbutt, if that fight went forward and Mauricio Lara would have won that fight, both of these guys would be sitting at 26-2 for what it's worth. But yeah, when they remade this fight between Leigh Wood and Mauricio Lara, I was overjoyed. I thought we were going to get something more like Leigh Wood versus Leo Santa Cruz. It looked like that was where they were headed because they were trying to consolidate the titles, or should I say consolidate the WBA title at featherweight. But Santa Cruz finally relinquished that super title that he had been holding for several years, even though he hadn't competed at featherweight for over 3 years. Now this fight between Leigh Wood and Lara, it's for the total WBA featherweight title. So this is the fight that I wanted to see to begin with. And it's funny, even though Leigh Wood's last 2 wins were against Zhu Khan, that was the fight that earned him the WBA featherweight title, and he finished Zhu Khan in the 12th round in a fight that he was just beating the heck out of Zhu Khan. Zhu Khan looked like he was walking in mud in that fight, and Leigh Wood was just a lot more fluid with his punches, was coming forward, putting the combinations together, throwing uppercuts and hooks. Well, after Leigh Wood won that belt against Zhu Khan, his next fight was in March of 2022, and it resulted in what I and many others consider to be the fight of the year for 2022, and that was against Michael Conlan. And that was just a sensational fight. Conlan dropped him so badly in the first round. Look how many times Conlan is able to get that long straight left hand off and land flush against Leigh Wood in the first 2 rounds. It's like Leigh Wood just could not get a read on it. Well, after having a rough first couple of rounds, Leigh Wood had to rally back, and it ended up being a tit-for-tat, all-out war that resulted in Leigh Wood knocking Michael Conlan out of the ring, knocked him out in the 12th round. And as Conlan was going out of the ring, his brother, Michael Conlan's brother, caught Michael Conlan outside of the ring. Super dramatic scene in Leigh Wood's hometown of Nottingham, England. And even before the 12th round, the round just before that, the 11th, Leigh Wood was kind of perceived to be rallying back in the fight, but because Michael Conlan had such a good start and was kind of the cleaner technician between the two, it was Leigh Wood trying to pressure, and it was Michael Conlan, who's got his own type of pressure, but was the more calculated puncher between the two. Leigh Wood in the later rounds started to walk Michael Conlan down a bit more, and in the 11th round, Leigh Wood picked up a knockdown, and that was just what he needed to have a legitimate shot at winning on the scorecards. So it was a dramatic knockdown in the 11th round in a very close fight, and then in the 12th round, Leigh Wood finished Michael Conlan. Brilliant fight. That's just one of those that you have to see to believe. But even though these were Leigh Wood's last 2 fights against Khan and then against Conlan, and they both resulted in 12th round knockout wins, it's almost like the public still isn't totally buying into Leigh Wood being an elite fighter. I feel like he still has a reputation of being a gutsy fighter, of being a very daring and valiant fighter, and being a hard puncher. I think that they do respect his punching power. But I feel like the sentiment is that as soon as Leigh Wood gets in there with a truly elite fighter, which by the way, I do think that Michael Conlan will prove to be a very good fighter. Look at the 2 fights that he had after that vicious knockout at the hands of Leigh Wood. Conlan is looking really good, and it's funny, Conlan has had 2 fights since that all-out war with Leigh Wood. This is Leigh Wood's first fight since the Conlan fight, nearly a year later. So it's just interesting that the guy who got knocked unconscious, knocked out of the ring in the 12th round, has been a lot busier since that battle. But I feel like the public is still not sure if Leigh Wood is an elite fighter. And maybe it's because he lost a majority decision to Jaza Dickens in February of 2020. That was just before the COVID COVID pandemic, but it's like Leigh Wood is kind of seen to still be like a good fighter, but not even potentially a great fighter. I feel like an applicable European region reputation. I almost feel like Leigh Wood has more of like a Maxie Hughes reputation, not in terms of their fight styles or attributes or anything, but just in terms of where they are on the pecking order of fighters from that region. Even though Leigh Wood, aside from the Jazza Dickens loss, only has one other loss. So it's not like Leigh Wood has been like a gatekeeper type, win some, lose some sort of fighter. No, he's been winning all but 2 of his fights. And his other loss was way back in 2014 in a TKO loss to Gavin McDonald. But even if you look at the betting odds between Leigh Wood and Mauricio Lara, it's Lara, the challenger, who's a minus 250. So he's like a 2.5 to 1 favorite. And I did an early thoughts video on this fight. Go ahead and check that out. I do give a lot of my Leigh Wood and Mauricio Lara insights, but if you look at the comments, most people tend to believe that Mauricio Lara is going to smoke Leigh Wood. I mean, I saw a few people saying Leigh Wood's going to stop Lara, but by and large, most people think that it's this buzzsaw who viciously knocked out Josh Warrington, Mauricio Lara, and has looked absolutely devastating since. People tend to think that he is going to get the stoppage win over Leigh Wood. And I can see why they would think that. I mean, look at how hard this guy seems to be punching. I mean, this guy is an animal in there. And look, and hats off to Leigh Wood. Nobody really wants to fight Mauricio Lara right now. Like, in the years and fights to come, it might turn out that there was like a bubble around Mauricio Lara and that he didn't turn out to be as good as he was looking in these last few fights. Like maybe he picks up some losses down the line and his reputation changes. And then a lot of people want to fight him all of a sudden, and he's not this boogeyman anymore. Maybe that ends up being the case going forward. But let the record show that when Mauricio Lara has been perceived as his absolute deadliest and his stock is at his all-time high, that Leigh Wood wanted the smoke with Mauricio Lara. Sometimes when fighters' careers continue and they start to pick up losses, we forget about the reputations and we forget about the perceptions of certain fights going into the fight. Remember that Mauricio Lara is the clear betting favorite in this one. And I've been thinking about this fight a lot, and I've been back and forth on how I see Leigh Wood versus Mauricio Lara play out. On one hand, I can see a total demolition. Yes, it is possible that Mauricio Lara catches Leigh Wood in the first couple of rounds, hurts him. Leigh Wood tries to valiantly battle back, but then gets hurt again, and eventually stopped in like say round 4 or 5. By the way, Mauricio Lara's last 2 fights are both 3rd round knockouts. So maybe Mauricio Lara does just obliterate Leigh Wood. But on the other hand, I do think that there is something to be said about, I think it was Teddy Atlas, the famed trainer who, was mentee to the famed Cus D'Amato, right? Mike Tyson's early trainer and kind of father figure. Teddy Atlas attributes a quote to Cus D'Amato, and he says something to the effect of, when fighters are of equal skill, will wins. And the guy with less will only win if his skills and abilities are so far superior that his will never gets tested, something like that. Well, if these guys, Mauricio Lara and Leigh Wood, are on nearly equal grounds, and this is yet to be determined, we'll see if Leigh Wood can impact Mauricio Lara with his punching power in the same way that Lara can potentially impact Leigh Wood with his punching power. I tend to think that they have somewhat similar punching power. Maybe most of y'all think that Mauricio Lara is by far the more vicious puncher, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that these guys are nearly equal abilities wise. I've seen Leigh Wood have to dig very deep multiple times, and yes, he didn't come out on top against Jazza Dickens. He did lose that decision, but do you see Leigh Wood versus Lara going to decision? Look, it's possible, but I think that the much more likely scenario is that one of these guys finishes the other. And if these guys are able to survive each other's power in the early rounds, let's just say, look, I think that somebody's going to get hurt in the first few rounds. I don't know if they're going to get dropped, but I can see Leigh Wood kind of being on shaky legs by round 3. But if this fight goes into the middle rounds and then you see Leigh Wood start to come on strong. If this turns into a battle of attrition, I would start to lean Leigh Wood. And it's not because Mauricio Lara doesn't have heart per se, but if you look at his fight 2 fights ago against Emilio Sanchez, that was just after Lara's back-to-back fights against Josh Warrington. Again, the first resulting in a TKO, 9th round knockout, vicious knockout, and then the second one becoming a technical draw because of the headbutts. I feel like that should be overturned, by the way, to a no contest because it was in the second round. And I feel like draw indicates that these guys like went a few rounds and it was determined to be a draw. But if this one becomes a battle of attrition, I want you to look at Lara versus Sanchez. And yes, Lara did knock Sanchez out viciously, like he does a lot of his opponents. He knocked him out badly at the end, like the final bell of the 3rd round. But just before that, look at how badly Mauricio Lara is hurt to the body against Sanchez. Look at the way Lara is holding on to Sanchez, kind of falling down forward at Sanchez's feet, and then kind of, looking at the ref strangely as he gets up and the ref tells him to get up and get his stuff together and to continue to fight. Look at Lara's body language in that moment. I'm almost not sure whether it was the body shot or a headshot that hurt Lara, but he looked like he was in trouble, and he looked like he was kind of unraveling mentally a little bit. Maybe I'm making too much of that, but I did see a little bit of, look, Mauricio Lara has been stopped before. I think it was a body shot against Elliot Chavez back in 2018. It was a 1st round knockout, and I think it was a body shot that finished Lara. So I do believe that there is some vulnerability there, especially if it was in fact a body shot that Emilio Sanchez hurt Lara with in March of 2022. So yes, Mauricio Lara is a devastating puncher, and he does seem to be one of the most feared people in the division. By the way, I know Navarrete and Ray Vargas are both flirting at 130. We'll see how Ray Vargas does against O'Shaquie Foster. We just saw Navarrete have one of the fights of the year contenders, an early fight of the year contender against Liam Wilson, and pretty much escaped by the skin of his teeth, got dropped badly. Look, I thought Navarrete was about to get stopped at the hands of Liam Wilson, but I would encourage Navarrete to come back to featherweight. I don't think that his physical attributes are going to work for him in the same way at 130 that they did at 122 and at 126. But if we're looking at this 126-pound division, wouldn't you just love to see either Leigh Wood or Mauricio Lara take on Navarrete or Ray Vargas if he comes back? There are a few really good fighters at 126. I don't know what's going to happen with Gary Russell Jr., but you still have Mark Magsayo. You've got up-and-comers like, Robeisy Ramirez and Michael Conlan. You've got Luis Alberto Lopez, who just upset Josh Warrington. You've got a lot going on at featherweight, but man, I love this Leigh Wood versus Mauricio Lara fight. And I would love to see any permutation of either one of them fighting either one of those other guys that I just mentioned. I know that there are always cross-promotional hurdles when we discuss these. But yeah, Mauricio Lara deserves the killer reputation that he's earned over the last few fights. And there is a strong possibility that he hurts and at some point finishes Leigh Wood. I'm just saying, if Leigh Wood makes it out of the first few rounds, watch out. Because if this does come down to a battle of guts and heart, and both of the guys are tired, both of the guys are a bit hurt, I could see Leigh Wood winning this one, and I could see him stopping Mauricio Lara late. With that said, my pick is going to be Mauricio Lara to finish Leigh Wood somewhere between like the 5th and 7th rounds. I still think that that is the most likely scenario. One, because if you look at Leigh Wood's style of fighting, Leigh Wood is a bit of a headhunter. Like if you look at the CompuBox numbers between him and Conlan, Conlan landed like 80 body shots on Leigh Wood. Leigh Wood landed 34 body shots on Michael Conlan. He didn't jab to the body once. So he's not like one of these guys, he's far from like a Shakur Stevenson or somebody who's gonna like jab you high, then jab you low to the belly to keep you off rhythm, off balance, and to kind of throw that stabbing jab to the body. Like, I feel like it's that type of a boxer who would get the better of Mauricio Lara. Somebody who really knows how to box in that way where they could use their jab hand that effectively and they know how to mix in the body shots. Leigh Wood, he is a hard puncher and he could get you out of there. He can knock you out. but I don't think he mixes in enough jabs. Like his jabs against Conlan were 12 out of 128. Conlan landed over double that amount of jabs. He landed 26 and threw far fewer jabs, only 98. So he threw fewer and landed more jabs. Again, Leigh Wood 12 out of 128 jabs. But Leigh Wood loves to let his hands go with the power punches, and he throws those hooks and uppercuts up top. To me, he's not throwing enough shots to the body. And I feel like that would have to be one of the ingredients in your recipe for success against Mauricio Lara. So if that was a part of Leigh Wood's repertoire a bit more, I think that I would possibly even go Leigh Wood. But because to my eyes, it hasn't been, I'm gonna go Mauricio Lara to get the stoppage. Again, between rounds 5 and round 7, I think there are gonna be some dramatic moments. I do think Leigh Wood's gonna get hurt early. I think he's gonna rally back. I think he's gonna have his moments of catching Mauricio Lara cleanly. I think the Nottingham crowd, this is gonna be a Leigh Wood hometown fight, is gonna be raucous, and I think they're gonna cheer their guy on. I just think that they're eventually gonna get heartbroken by the middle rounds. But again, I think Leigh Wood's really gonna have his moments. And if this fight does go into the late rounds, we might be in for another fight of the year contender. Seriously. Like, I know we've had a few of them and it's only February, but look, there are a few different things that could happen in this fight results wise. I don't see Leigh Wood stopping Lara early. Lara could potentially stop Leigh Wood early. He could stop him in the middle rounds. But I think that if there's going to be a late stoppage, I feel like it would be Leigh Wood stopping Mauricio Lara. But yeah, I can't wait for this one. Let me know your thoughts on Leigh Wood versus Mauricio Lara. Again, I'm taking Mauricio Lara via mid-round stoppage, but I was very tempted to take Leigh Wood. I tend to believe in Leigh Wood. I like Leigh Wood's style, not so much from an X's and O's standpoint, but just because of what I've seen, you know, even in the fights before Johnson Dickens, if you saw his fight against David Joyce or against Ryan Doyle, Leigh Wood, like, he likes to make exciting fights, and the way that he disguises some of his hooks and uppercuts and throws kind of that two-fisted attack while going forward, yes, he does kind of keep his chin up high, and that might also be his undoing against Mauricio Lara. Like, I don't think Leigh Wood's gonna suddenly turn into a great defensive fighter overnight. His chin being high, I think it's gonna come back to bite him. But man, I think we're gonna have some theater here. I do think we're gonna have some drama. But please let me know what your thoughts are on what I see as being one of the funnest fights on the boxing calendar as it stands. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Wood. Thanks for tuning in.